So what's up with Tillerson and Pompeo? Do Americans care about the recent Israeli political crisis? I know exactly who has the answers to my questions. Let's fly over the pond, straight to I-24 news anchor Tal Heinrich, joining us from our studios in Times Square, New York. Tal, it is good to see you. How you doing?
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Ami.
A pleasure, always, always. Look, let's start with Tillerson, Tal. It's been a day since Rex Tillerson was sacked by Donald Trump. Pundits here in Israel are looking at Mike Pompeo, his replacement, his very pro-Israel statements and very, anti-Iran nuclear deal stance. What do you think? How could this appointment affect our region and this country as well?
Well, I guess that we can say that so far, the state of Israel and more so the Netanyahu government, the right-wing government, can be very satisfied with all the measures that the Trump administration has taken in regards to the Middle East and more specifically in regards to Israel. Now, more so with this latest appointment of Mike Pompeo, the former CIA director, as new Secretary of State, because we know that he is a supporter of the government in Israel right now. We can say that. And he's also known to be a hardliner when it comes to the Iran nuclear deal, both as a CIA director and as a former congressman. We know that he used to criticize the Obama administration for this deal, and he is much more in line with President Donald Trump on this issue than what Secretary of State Tillerson was. We know that the former secretary tried to save the Iran nuclear deal and take certain measures and make efforts to save it. And now, just to give you one example of what Pompeo, for example, tweeted before he became the CIA director on his personal Twitter in regards to the Iran nuclear deal, he said, "I look forward to rolling back this disastrous deal with the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism." This is exactly what Prime Minister Netanyahu would want a U.S. Secretary of State to say. Yeah,
definitely, I agree. Let's move on to our side of the pond, Tal. Yesterday, all of Israeli media was kind of worried we were about to go to elections. Was this major political crisis? Maybe some people are actually calling it a fake crisis now, but was this crisis covered at all in the U.S. media?
Of course, it got some attention on U.S. media, but it wasn't covered the way the Israeli media covered it, with more focus on the draft bill regarding the Haredi population, the Haredi draft bill. So over here, the U.S. media focused on investigations against Prime Minister Netanyahu and also the idea of snap elections. And if headlines over here read just a few weeks ago, just like in Israel, by the way, is this the beginning of the end for Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel? So now we're seeing headlines calling the coalition survives, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu survives, well, for now. And one more thing, if you're asking about how Netanyahu appears maybe overseas, so I have to tell you that the U.S. media is also focused on the Israeli media polls showing that he's still very strong in his position, because these polls, as we saw over the past few days, suggest that the Likud party, Netanyahu's party, is still coming in on top of, if elections were to be held as of this week, with 29 or even 30 seats in parliament. And also these polls show a strong support for Prime Minister Netanyahu, with a major gap over other potential candidates to replace him as prime minister, with 36% of the population probably thinking that Netanyahu is still the most suited person for the role. And U.S. media is not overlooking that, Ami.
Okay, and it looks like the prime minister is going to stay in power, or at least until maybe elections in 2019. It'll be interesting to see how that affects the stalemate between Israelis and Palestinians, which brings me to my next topic, Gaza. Representatives for more than 20 countries and international organizations met yesterday at the White House, Tal, and discussed that humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Israel was there with 6 Arab countries, the majority of which they don't have diplomatic relations with. But correct me if I'm wrong, there was one very important group of people that were missing.
The Palestinian Authority, yes. I mean, this also happened yesterday, in between the ousting of Tillerson and the assassination attempt of Rami Hamdallah, Palestinian prime minister in Gaza. This conference on Gaza also took place, and the Palestinians were absent. The issue is that the PLO, first, they still very much furious about the Trump administration over the Jerusalem Declaration as the capital of Israel, but also members of the PLO accused the Trump administration and also Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt, the architects of the future peace plan that will be very soon introduced, that according to the New York Times and this very conference, they were the people who convened it. So PLO members accused them of focusing on Gaza as a matter of a humanitarian crisis and less in touch with the role Israel plays in regards to Gaza, sort of disconnecting the humanitarian issue as if it just takes place and it has nothing to do with an Israeli blockade from Palestinian eyes on the Gaza Strip. So many countries, as you mentioned, including Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, also Qatar and Saudi Arabia, had sent representatives to this conference, and Israel also sent Yoav Poli Mordechai as a representative of the government and, by the way, the IDF for his role.
All right, Tal Heinrich from Times Square, New York, thank you very much.